Hello, 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 and welcome to the Jolly Heretic. I trust you have had a salubrious and pleasant preceding week, and that if you're in the UK, you're terribly excited about the election campaign which is going on, and if you're in America, then you're terribly excited about your election campaigns last for years. I mean, the ongoing election campaign that's going on that will, of course, culminate in November with huge riots and the and mass destruction in your country. Welcome to the Jolly Heretic. We are, of course, an online public house that meets on Mondays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York, where we discuss interesting science and stuff that is expounded by our woke joke universities, and also increasingly, it seems, narcissism and related personality disorders that are so relevant to all of our lives. Hello, resident poet. So cheers, everybody. Cheers, resident poet. Cheers, Richard. Cheers, Carlotta. Salute. Saludo, Capis, Proust, Prost, Slanger, and what is it in Russian? I can't remember. Nazdrovne and Yahida and Skol and welcome to the Jolly Heretic. Hello, everybody. Hello, those that are watching on the Jolly Heretic, and hello, those such as Aurora, who says cheers. Hello, Aurora. Who are watching over on Richard's channel. Slander indeed, Suzanne. Slander to you. Yes, Richard is on a Diet Coke. Hello from Iceland, Lulu. I don't know what cheers is in Icelandic. I imagine it's probably skol. So I'm going to go for skol. So skol. If you're in Iceland, I was in Iceland in 2017 and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Lots of very aggressive ponies. Have you been to Iceland, Richard?
I haven't. I've flown over it. It looks very pretty.
It's very pretty. Aggressive ponies and a museum about penises and Kentucky Fried
Chicken. 1 minute 59 seconds in, and that's the first penis.
No, that's not my fault. I'm simply telling you about what it's like in Iceland, and that's the eccentricity that you have in Reykjavik, and a very nice cathedral there. Again, Skol, Carlotta, mud in your eye, Charlie Pepper. How are you doing? Last week didn't tank with Charlie. No, absolutely not. No, if anything, I think it helped it. I think people like that. So cheers to people in Kentucky. I was in Kentucky. I was in London, Kentucky about 11 years ago. And I saw a wrestling match. It was sort of like poor man's WWE. It was great. And the guy he did a sort of a flip off the turnbuckle. I don't know when we're publishing that thing where we knew wrestle. It was quite fun, and it went wrong. I should, and it got him in the ribs, and they stayed in character and everything. Like the equivalent of Jack Tunney or whatever, or Vince McMahon stayed in character, but it had obviously gone wrong. And everybody else hung around afterwards in order to do autographs and selfies and things like that. But that wrestler, he went off. He obviously had to go to hospital. So it went wrong, but they stayed in character. And we have someone from Nashville called Amanda Love. Have you been to Texas? Someone's asking. George Girl. Only to the airport in Dallas, which was by far the worst airport I've ever been to. Chaos. Absolute chaos. I had to change there in order to go to Mexico City, and I almost missed my flight due to the chaos. Indeed, they didn't break kayfabe, Milton Bates. That's quite right. Tomorrow, am I not hanging out with John? Not at the moment. No, he's got, as you may know, there's something interesting happening for him. Hello, Mr. Quinn. Local Backen, how are you doing? Cheers. Right. Now, I'm interested then, chaps, this election, what's happening in the UK. And I see, I know I'd be interested to hear what Richard thinks about this, of the sort of psychological cycle of a government. It seems to be exhausted, run out, can't be bothered anymore. And I wonder what theories would help to explain the frankly self-destructive and insane behavior that we are seeing during this election campaign. We have seen the Prime Minister, who is of Indian extraction, which is something that no one's really mentioned very much, but they're mentioning it now, leaving the remembrance, the D-Day remembrance 80th anniversary early, which was seen as an insult and whatever. It looked very, very bad because you had the Foreign Secretary representing the British and not the Prime Minister. And then you have the chairman of the Conservative Party declaring himself the candidate for a safe seat against the wishes of the populace, which looks bad. It's not a good look. And you have then, of course, this it just seems like it's falling apart, and I wonder why it is. Do you think is there some more psychological insight? Why does it get to this stage with these people?
Well, I have two questions for you first, there, before I answer that. For the Americans amongst us, conservatives sort of map to their Republicans, don't they?
Pretty much, sort of.
Pretty
Not
much.
exactly, sort of, yeah.
Not exactly, but pretty much. And conservative policy by nature is usually to conserve the pre-existing order. I presume that's where it originally came from, to be on the right side of the house after the French Revolution, is the conservation of that which already is, rather than to be a revolutionary and change everything, right?
Mm.
So they've been in for 6 years. Your understanding of politics is better than mine. How conservative have they actually been?
No, they've been 14 years, Richard. 14 years. The Conservative government has been for 14 years. Since 2010, we've had a Conservative government in England, haven't we?
Oh, right.
14 years. So that's why they're exhausted. They wouldn't be exhausted after 6 years. Yeah, they've done, as far as I can see, they've done nothing. It's quite similar in many ways to the sort of, I don't know, Ted Heath or something like that. Except ironically, he took us into the EU rather than out of it. But the only thing they have just got that which Labour has done, all of the tinkering with the Constitution, all of the tinkering with free speech, all of the tinkering with education, and they've and the high immigration of up to 700,000 people a year, and they've either made that worse, i.e., tuition fees were 3,000 when Labour left, now they're 9,000 or 10,000 or whatever. I.e., there was lots and lots of wokeness when Labour left. Now we're incredibly woke. As Charlie Pepper is saying, they've reversed absolutely nothing. They've at all. It's just characterised by basically Brexit and COVID. They've done nothing.
So there's Brexit and COVID, which is a stain on that record. They've been in for a long time. Did they not have the will to make the changes, or did they not have the power to make the changes?
I think they had the power to make the changes once Boris won the election in 2019 with a large majority of 80. Then they could have done what they wanted, anything they wanted, basically. But almost immediately. But I don't think they didn't have any policies of reversing Blair's changes. They had various policies, but there was no desire. There was no will, as Brendan Gordon is saying. There was no will to fundamentally reverse things. And then there was this huge, sense of confidence after having broken the Brexit deadlock, after all these years of attrition, everything's going to be great. And then of course, and then COVID hit in, and that was it. That they couldn't really do anything other than COVID, and it's just COVID and its consequences.
So then to answer the question that you asked, I would think if you take it from a macro level to a micro level to a person rather than a party, if you don't have any authentic will, and I'm not a particularly political person, but what I see is a lack of will, but a lot of performance. So there's an awful lot of emphasis on seeming to want to tick the right boxes, but there's no actual will behind anything. And I would even go so far as to claim that we're living in a will-phobic culture. Like, you mustn't have a drive, you mustn't have a will, you shouldn't have ideological coordinates that you strive towards in a sort of a red-blooded masculine yang way. It's just not considered acceptable, which is why I asked the question, as a not particularly political person. We've had conservatives in for 14 years. Where's the conservative policies? So then I would think it would be pretty humiliating, and for them, they must be tired of the performance.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, actually. Yeah, I mean, if we go back to the 70s, to the last time the Conservatives came in after a period of opposition, the country was in, I don't remember this, obviously, neither do you, but the country was in chaos. The country was dominated by the unions. Nothing could get done. You had these pay caps, you had all of this sort of anti-capitalist, anti-innovation, semi-socialist kind of stuff. Country was the poor, sick man of Europe. You had strikes all the time, electricity cuts, the dead unburied, famously, winter of discontent, rubbish rotting in the streets, all this. And there was a will, there was this feeling, admittedly among a much older generation who had, suffered and been through hardship and the war and stuff like this, that this is absolutely ridiculous. This is Britain in decline and we can't have this. And they came in. And then I suppose there was an economic crisis, and normally if there's an economic crisis, the government loses the election. But she didn't lose the election in '83 because the opposition were far left and nutcases and whatever. And remember, we're up against the Soviet Union. And she had the Falklands War, which buoyed her up and gave her the confidence, the Falklands War, to then take on the unions, which she did in '84. And then she was able, from '84 to '90, to fundamentally change the country radically, sell off all of the nationalized industries, shut down useless industries that weren't making any money, as she saw it, really alter the country and make it, I mean, for good or ill, sell off council houses, but whatever, but do radically shake things up. And I think Blair came in with this new generation. We passed to the boomers are in, he's in, and they managed to do a massive majority, incredible confidence that comes with that. It was the feeling of change, and they came in and they did things, terrible things, awful things, evil things, but they did them, and they had this confidence. And by the time you get to Brown or whatever, it's run out, and they're just sort of. But I don't think with the Conservatives they had much of an idea what they wanted to do in the first place.
So I'm going to pontificate, but this is the place to do it. I meant to discuss this with you last time we saw each other. We didn't get a chance. So you jokingly said to me that politically you see yourself as a British imperialist. That's where you would put yourself on the spectrum, British imperialist. And I wondered if after World War II, the sentiment, obviously neither of us were there, in the UK, was after facing these two mass murdering psychopaths in the face of Stalin, in the face of Hitler, and that kind of will that they represented and that drive for nation building that they overtly spoke about, and they were prepared to, in that Machiavellian dark tetrad way, do terrible things, and the end justifies the means kind of a thing. Did we, after the Brits, and maybe Europe as a whole, maybe even Canada and America, did we develop an aversion to a red-blooded expression of a national will and nation building? And was that what led to the rather anemic policies that came after World War II? Or am I talking out of?
Well, are they anemic? I mean, it seems to me that you had a situation after World War II where there hadn't been an election since for 10 years. And the Labour Party had these ideas that they wanted, which were forged in a sense of unity that people felt that they'd all been through World War II and suffered and whatever. And so there was this sense of national unity and of class divisions being overcome by things like rationing and the various communitas that's created by war. And so they did radically change the country. They had a clear idea what they wanted to do. They wanted a welfare state along the lines that Sweden had brought in the 30s. And that's what they brought in. I don't know if it's red-blooded. It's red-blooded in so much as it's forcing things through. And the NHS had to be forced through. Nye Bevan basically gave the medical establishment an offer they couldn't refuse, and so it was kind of forced through that you had nationalisation of the health service. So I think that there was a will to those people. Some sort. It wasn't nationalistic, but it wasn't bellicose, but it was a desire to get things done and radically change the country in a way that was pretty hard to unchange. And then the Conservatives came in 51, and they were just stuck with. They completely unnecessarily called an election in 51. They didn't need to call it, but they called it and they lost. And the Conservatives are in, and they didn't do that much. What they just benefited from an economic boom at the end of. I mean, what they were saying, let's get rid of rationing. That Labour was going to keep rationing, so they got rid of rationing, put the country back to normal, and you have the 50s, which was this time of relative boom, really, where things were going quite well. But they were out. There was this bubbling underneath, winds of change, the destruction of the empire, whatever, and they were this aristocratic old guard that they didn't really. I don't think they did very much. They just managed the country, in much the same way that the Conservatives have now. And then you, for 14 years, about the same period of time actually, and then you have all these scandals associated with the aristocracy and the old order being humiliated, the Lady Chatterley book being published, all these scandals, and then they just look stupid and they lose they lose the election. Only just lost it as well. They only just lost the 1964 election. And so maybe there is a parallel to those governments. I mean, it was all, they were just disgraced. But I don't think that there was no major problem that happened under those governments. Like there was Suez, but there was no major problem. Whereas that you've got an economic crisis, a terrible economic crisis that's we're basically living through now, even if it's not legally a recession, and the aftermath of COVID.
Yes. So I do wonder as well then from another. So there's two questions I have. One is, were we already breaking up the empire before World War II, or did that mainly happen after World War II?
It was substantially after. I mean, India was the first to go. That was 48.
Do you not think some of these things could have been a response to not wanting to look like National Socialists, not wanting to look like zealots of Stalin's army, or do you think I'm? Maybe...
I don't know. I think people say that with eugenics. They say, oh, well, the reason why eugenics has become taboo is because of the Nazism, but that's not true. It was becoming less popular before the war, from about 1929 onwards, and it wasn't really until the 60s that it really started to become a problem. So that's I think that's a kind of a rewriting of history that many people do say, oh yeah, the Nazis eugenics. No, it wasn't. No, eugenics carried on being reasonably popular till the 60s. And then you have the rise of this individualistic culture, and that's when it changes. And that's when the countries like, I mean, Sweden had laws on the books to sterilize people that were classified as mentally retarded till the early 70s.
Wow.
So that's when it changes, not after the war. So I think there's something. So in terms of not being overtly powerful, I suspect there might be something to do with that generation. The boomers, they come to power in England anyway in the late 90s. Blair, that cohort maybe, but they're not. It's a soft power, and it's a sort of virtue signaling and whatever kind of thing.
Well, as you said, they were pushing through with the will, but the will of this pinched sort of death drive.
Yeah.
Equality,
The will of the pathetic, the will of the Übermensch.
The Untermensch.
Sorry, Untermensch. Yes, the will of the yes. You would know these terms better than me. But the will of the Untermensch. So, but the key thing I was thinking about was that there was an analysis which found that if you look at the when governments lose elections, then a key factor is an economic crisis. So out of 27 elections that occurred between, was it 1900 and the last one, in 19 of those where the government has fallen, it's because of an economic crisis. And so you've got it, almost certainly it's an economic crisis. So for sometimes they will manage to hang on a bit longer by changing their leader, that sort of thing. That could avert it a bit. So, for example, Margaret Thatcher, there was all these problems coming. There was the beginnings of what later you saw in '92 with the crashing out of the ERM. But they thought about changing their leader to deal with it with Redwood, but then eventually no, and of course there was a crushing loss. It's an economic crisis in the 70s that brings in Margaret Thatcher. It's an economic crisis to some extent in the 60s that brings in Labour, and on it goes like that. So it's as if the economic crisis is so psychologically is so difficult to deal with. It exhausts the government. People lose confidence in them. That's the first thing. So they are the ones that are in charge when bad things are happening, like people's homes being repossessed or people losing their jobs or whatever. So therefore they look to the opposition, and if the opposition's reasonably competent, they'll be okay. The problem in 1992 was the opposition was led by Neil Kinnock, and it's just not going to happen, is it?
As Sunak decided to jump off the pot before the economic crisis gets any worse?
Well, he had to call the election by the end of the year anyway.
Okay.
So I don't know whether he, but and he must have known that he was going to lose, and he was going to lose very, very badly. But I mean, it didn't have to be this way, did it? I mean, you have an economic crisis, you have the crisis of COVID, and then I think also a general lack of trust in all politics, and particularly the government, because we are now, the lies of COVID and all this are now coming out. And the Brexit referendum 8 years ago, which was a complete lie. And since then, what the people clearly and explicitly voted for, which was control over their borders, i.e. that means less immigration, has not happened. It's just got worse. And so you've got, but I suppose it must just, you've got, this lack of will. I think about as well, like the kind of people that are going to get involved of my age or a bit older, that are going to come up through the Conservative Party during a period in which it's in crisis, i.e. 15 years ago. And you can see how they might think to themselves, particularly if they're women. Well, there's not many women involved in the Conservative Party, so I'm a woman, that's a plus. They're deliberately over-promoting women and ethnic minorities as well, so that's a plus. It's a way of getting power. So are these a kind of Machiavellian people that are in it for power, rather than people that have gone into politics with any great principle? David Cameron certainly doesn't come across as very principled at all.
No, I mean, I didn't want to automatically take it there, but I mean, the more you're telling me, the more it looks that that's probably the case. Is that under certain circumstances, as you've just alluded to, more dark tetrad types are going to come through, and they're not interested in creating actual change or authentic benefit for the nation. They're only interested in themselves, and so they will behave narcissistically. They will create more narcissistic psychopathic coordinates within the power structure that rewards more narcissistic psychopathic reflections of their various signalings, be they virtuous or purity signalings on the other side. And you end up with an echo chamber that's full of nothingness. I did wonder during the Boris Johnson reign whether it would be better if he didn't have access to social media and to Twitter. There was this sense that I got that there was a very tight feedback loop of negative feedback that he was receiving, that he was hypersensitive to, that he just shouldn't have been accessing. It wasn't helping him, because you can't be sensitive to that. You should surge ahead with what you think is right. You can't be changing and responding to policies week by week and day by day based on whether somebody said something mean to you online.
Is that what he did?
It was the way I felt. It was the way, as I was watching that happening, it looked jumpy. It looked.
Apparently, according to biographies of him, he likes to be popular. That's what he likes. He likes being popular.
That's a problem.
And that, whereas Margaret Thatcher didn't give a damn about being popular, and she didn't even read the newspapers.
Right.
Whereas this was a person that, as you say, likes to be popular, likes to be liked. And apparently, when he meets people, we've both met people that have met him. He makes them feel great, and he makes a point of going around and talking to everybody and all this sort of thing and socializing. He likes socializing. He likes meeting people. He likes people liking him.
Yes.
And there's a difference between being liked and liking being admired. And I think he likes being liked. And
that's a weakness. That's a real problem in a leader, because I know that the policies that he put in place for COVID were not the ones he wanted to put in place. He said that all of these things, like only 1 hour walk a day, it's in defiance of my libertarian sentiments, he said. But I think it's what we should do. Well, a week before he said that's absolutely not what we should do, he was browbeaten into it. And I do think that if you're going to be a leader, there is a degree of belligerence that you need to have, where you can say, no, I'm disagreeable. I'm doing it the way I think is right. Otherwise, we'll never get anything done. If I set a policy this week and change it next week,
if COVID hadn't happened, he'd have been able to drive through. I mean, there were various things he wanted to do, and he would have been able to drive them through with the majority of 80. But then COVID happened, and he was not the right prime minister for COVID. This was a serious crisis. He was much more kind of a Harold Macmillan sort of prime minister, who's charismatic and jolly and likable and a bit of a bon vivant. And then he it gets in times when the economy's doing okay and good things happen. He obviously wasn't a sort of Mrs. Thatcher who gets in when there's a crisis and has this incredible nerve and pushes her way through the crisis. It's much what happened actually, interestingly, to Macmillan is that he under the pressure of all this stuff about Christine Keeler, for our American viewers, in Macmillan was Prime Minister 57 to 63. In 63, it was revealed that the Minister of War, Profumo, was having an affair with a Russian naval attaché, was having an affair with a woman who was herself having an affair with a Russian naval attaché, and so it was a serious security risk. And this brought the government to crisis, and then they lost the election the following year, and Labour came into power, and it also just undermined the whole patrician gentry sort of system which they embodied. And I think that he would be able to, in those sort of circumstances, like Macmillan, who said, we've never had it so good, and he won the, I think it was 59 election on this basis, he'd have been fine. But COVID happened, and he just wasn't the person for COVID. And then I suppose, as I say, I didn't live there, but from what I've been told about it, it's horrific. And confidence is just then lost. There's just no getting over. They meandered around during COVID, and then if we track it down, what happened? He comes in, David Cameron. He has this coalition government that's reasonably tickety-boo. Things are going all right. People are getting richer. He gets a majority in 2015, which he didn't expect to get. And so he had these policies which he didn't expect to have to implement, because he assumed that he'd be in a coalition with the Lib Dems and they would stop him having a referendum on the EU because he wouldn't have a majority. But he had a majority, and so he had to go ahead with it. And then he, of course, assumed that he would win it, as he did the Scottish National referendum. And then that's it. So then you have this crisis. Nothing gets done. Theresa May, this establishment coup to stop the will of the people. Something has to break it. Something has to give. And what gives is the opponents being worn down. And then Boris comes in and calls an election, and through his charisma and a very crap opposition, wins. And so then that's it. It's broken. It's done. But he's the person to do that, to do something like that. But he did it. But he should have almost resigned. He was not the person with COVID. Yeah. It was that winning that election was about being likable, likable that working class people, like the people I met in Liverpool, that are tribally Labour, and would vote for anything, like would vote for a hat stand if it had a red rosette on it. Yeah. Could be persuaded they liked him so much, they were so pissed off by the Brexit thing that they would vote Conservative, and that's what he did. Yes. But then, boom, it's exhausting.
I do think as well, for a lot of people within that party, they must be looking at the role of leadership and think, God, what a thankless task. You really can't do right for doing wrong now. There's nothing you can do where you won't be castigated for it. So therefore, you would lose the aspiration to drive good people up and forward through the ranks to want that role, which then damages the collective will as well, I would think.
I suppose so. As you say, with regard to narcissism, you're going to get more and more people that are going to in this system of extreme, if you call it meritocracy, it attracts these Machiavellians, and that's who is going to be drawn into this. I mean, the egos. When I was secretary of Wimbledon Young Conservatives in 1999, and we were selecting the candidate for the election in 2001, 100 applicants for what was a Labour seat that had been lost from the Conservatives in 97. The egos floating around. I mean, these people, most of them were completely useless, and we narrowed it down to 3 people. And the person that was voted by the Conservative Association, who was mainly elderly ladies, he was head and shoulders above the rest. A guy called Stephen Hammond. The other 2 got so few votes that they didn't even read out the vote numbers because it was embarrassing. I mean, they were just useless. They were nervous. They corpsed on. They sort of froze on stage. And that was the final 3. They were crap. And the egos you get, and it didn't used to be like that. It didn't used to be all these people applying.
I think this is where you can see like the narcissism, the grandiose delusion, then it crossing over into the the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people misapprehend their competency in a field of expertise. They can misapprehend it up or down, but very often they overestimate their competency in a field of expertise. And I do wonder how much of that is fueled by some kind of latent narcissism because of the grandiose delusional element to it.
Certainly, there was a study that I was looking at today, which found that, as you would of course predict, people that are narcissistic, grandiose, now overestimate their own intelligence. And if you overestimate your own intelligence, and that comes together with the aspects of narcissism which are considered to be useful, such as confidence and charisma and all that sort of thing, then you get into a situation, you get into a position which you are over promoted for. You're over promoted. I've always said there's no such thing as being busy. There's just over promoted. Busy doesn't exist as a thing. It's like if it's a person that's very stupid will be busy doing a very simple task. There's no such thing as busy. When someone says to me, "Oh, I'm busy," no, you're a narcissist. You're a narcissist who is trying to signal your own importance and and how desired you are and how many people want to talk to you and whatever by saying you're busy. You're not busy. You're a narcissist. If you're stupid, you're over promoted. You're not busy. You're doing a degree in sociology at Durham University in the late 90s. How are you busy? How are you busy? Like if you want to spend, you have 6 hours of lectures a week, right? And maybe one seminar. You've got to write one essay a week. Takes a couple of hours to research, a couple of hours to write. In what sense are you? You're not busy. You're not busy. You're signaling to me that you're popular and you're in demand, and therefore you're busy. And these things that you've created that make you busy are actually just social things that you've set up so that you can have positions of influence within the university and little minor potentates. You're not busy.
I think there's some issues that need to be taken to therapy.
I hate that busy thing. You're not busy. No one is busy. Is Mr. Quinn going? I haven't read his poem yet. Oh, I'll read later. Sorry, Mr. Quinn. I mean, it's not. It doesn't. I've never understood that concept. You get it as well. Like you get busy academics. They talk about this a lot when you submit articles to academic journals. They say, "Oh yeah, well, it'll take us a long time to get it reviewed because academics are busy." And you're not busy. You're over promoted. Some people can dash off an academic paper just like that if they're clever. Some people, if they're not very clever, it takes them ages, and they've got to work really hard on it, and they've got to, they're
in the wrong position for the role.
They're in the wrong position. If you're in the right position that's conducive with your abilities, then you're not going to be. Yeah, Richard Evans says take a time over to. Ed says busy. All right, you're not. Well, I'm trying to think of a synonym for busy. There isn't really. It's that one word that encapsulates.
It's that one word that's the hashtag trigger.
Yeah, it is. That annoys me. That word. Right. You're not frantic.
Would you agree then that maybe once you get to a certain level of power in politics, you should submit to a mandatory IQ test?
Oh, that's a good point. It's a good point. But the problem with that is that there's much more to politics than IQ. So
okay, well, just set me a cutoff point. What's the minimum IQ?
Well, yeah, it would be appalling. I mean, that's the thing that we saw recently with Angela Rayner. I mean, she's obviously not very bright, bless her. Hence the Rayner effect, which I term this idea that the left are becoming stupider. She doesn't know the difference between abject and abstract, and she talks about how that the Conservatives have been an abstract failure. Now,
what does that mean? Like a Picasso painting?
Nothing. And that is such a sort of an IQ 105 thing to say.
Well, what would you speculate and say? Okay, in a perfect world, in Ed Dutton's utopia, all politicians past a certain level of power must be in excess of 115.
115, surely. Yeah, I mean, 115 is the IQ of like a school science teacher, and the idea that you'd be too stupid to teach GCSE, chemistry or biology. Is outrageous. So you surely, even if you've got like a degree in English literature or something, then by the time
a minefield, Ed, and you're dancing in it.
I don't see how I am. Then surely by the time you're 50, as intelligence goes up with age, then you'll be able to teach GCSE chemistry or something. So
does your IQ go up with age? Is that right?
Up to about the age of 60, yeah. Then it sort of settles and it starts to go down.
Whoa! How many points can you go up over from 20 to 60?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I mean, you're not going up points because it's with reference to those your own age group. So your performance IQ increases with age. Because once you get you're growing, your brain is growing when you're a child, and in puberty there's big increase. And then it just carries on because you're accruing more knowledge and other things which make you do better in IQ tests. And then eventually, when you get to about 60, it sort of stabilizes, and then you something's gone wrong with the comments. I can't see that. Anyway. And then your brain starts to deteriorate, and so your intelligence. I'm sorry, not your IQ, because IQ is a reference to your own age. Your raw intelligence score starts to go down, and also the main thing that causes that is that as you get beyond about 60, then you slow down, and a big part of your processing speed slows, and a big part of doing well in an intelligence test is how quickly you can solve the problem. So you might say anybody can solve a problem given long enough, but you've got to solve it against the clock. So I can see anyway. I do think about 115, and normally that was how it was, because how did you get into politics in the first place? You had to be quite intelligent. Either you'd been through, if you were on the Conservatives, you were probably gentry or middle class. You'd been to university or some profession or something like that. And if you were Labour, then you would work your way up through the trade unions, and they had education programs and things like this as well. So it would be reasonably bright people that would end up in politics. But yeah, it seems to be someone like Angela Rayner is obviously not very bright. She's like even John Prescott was probably brighter than her. And he used to do the same thing in malapropisms, getting his words wrong. But that she's abstract, abject. The idea that you don't know what the word abstract means. I mean, that seems to be quite a serious. I don't think it was a slip of the tongue either, because I saw her. She thought about her comment. She doesn't know what the word abstract means.
It was an abstract failure, the weirdest failure the world has ever seen.
Yeah, you've failed in an abstract.
Avant-garde failure.
You failed theoretically, but not in practice. You failed abstract failure. You failed in the world of abstract art.
It was a conceptual failure.
Conceptual failure. The Conservatives have failed conceptually, but
actually they did really well.
No, they've not failed in a concrete sense. In a concrete sense, they're very successful, but they. But yeah, Anders Ashes, they're saying, well, yeah, she's useless, and she's going to be deputy prime minister. It's like New Labour. It's like history repeating itself. That you have this not very bright. We talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning-Kruger effect. There's difficulty replicating that, but it's certainly true that there is a study that people that hide trait narcissism, like she must be, overestimate their own intelligence, overestimate their own abilities. I mean, imagine putting that woman in a situation where she had to make serious decisions. It would be disastrous. And as we see with this incompetence over her housing arrangements, that I'm not even sure that is a reflection of mendacity on her part. I think that's just
raw stupidity.
It's just thick. And she just doesn't understand what she's dealing with, or what. Like,
for the American audience, thick means stupid. He's not talking about her having large buttocks. I know it's.
Although she does have large breasts, but they're fake. Which is another indicator of narcissism.
Sorry, I took us there this time. That's on me.
Yeah, but that's another indicator of narcissism in a woman is that you have, or a man anyway, is that you have any kind of plastic surgery or. So
if I got fake breasts, that would make me more narcissistic.
If you were a woman, yeah. If you were a man, it just make you weird. But if you were, I don't know why. Well, there was a guy at my school, and
I did this. This is my fault.
Richard did this. Yeah. Well, a guy at my school, right, and like from PE, he had breasts. I mean, he had like dugs. I mean, it was like he was a milkable cow. It was extraordinary. You do get it. You do get some blokes that end up. I can't remember like the details of what causes it, but like, I was at the swimming pool in Oulu, and there was this boy, and he had. I mean, he wasn't even that fat, but he just had tits.
Beautiful.
I mean, it was a weird thing. And apparently, Adam Bolton, who used to present the news on Sky News, he had tits. He had tits. Yeah.
And then Too high estrogen levels can do it in men. They get
well, imagine that in man, and you've got like really. I mean, it was a point with this guy. He should have worn a bra. I mean, it was. I mean, it was serious. It was a serious.
Did you like Ed Scouse accent there? He should have worn a bra.
Worn a bra would have been sound, but he didn't wear a bra, but he should have done, because I mean he had seriously tipped. I mean, it was like vivacious, you know. And in those days, I mean, obviously there was no internet in those days, and the porn fairies only occasionally dropped massive amounts of porn behind bushes by main roads. So I mean, it was like that was the nearest thing there was, really, you know. So as poor chap,
report in a storm, Captain.
I did. It was hilarious when we used to do like running. We used to do like cross country running, and this. And also because he was a bit chubby, he was even worse at running than me. So you know, you'd look back when I did cross country running, I never came last because there was always the 4 fatties that were over there on the horizon. You know, reassuring me that I wasn't that bad. You know, there was always the sort of the distant glimmering 4 fatties on the horizon, and it was like, it was hilarious. It was. I won't name him, but it was great. It was terrific. I mean,
because IQ scores are dropping over the decades, if I get a high IQ score now of say 130, would that mean that back in the 1960s I would have been 115?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's why. So it's called that's the Flynn effect. So you have to or the negative Flynn effect. You have to re-norm them. So what was going on for a long time was the IQ scores were going up, but that didn't mean that people in Victorian times were stupid. It was this effect whereby the IQ scores were going up, but they weren't going up because we were more intelligent. They were going up because we were more educated, and that society was and people read more, and society was forcing us to think in basically a more scientific kind of way, to don, as it were, scientific spectacles, with the result that we started getting much better very quickly as a subcomponent of the IQ test, which is called similarities, which is where you have to assess the similarities between different shapes and work out what the next shape will be in the sequence. And we got better at this to such an extent and so quickly that it overwhelmed, and it's very environmentally sensitive, that it overwhelmed everything else that was happening on the imperfect IQ test, and it came across as an IQ rise. Whereas on the more genetic components of the IQ test, we were going down, but we were going up on that. So the nearest thing I can think of would be like that you're getting taller, but you're getting taller because your legs are getting longer. Your trunk could be getting shorter across time, but your leg, this bit for the Americans, but your legs are getting longer, and so you're getting taller. And this carries on until your leg length reaches its phenotypic maximum, and then the underlying reduction in height, which is going on at the trunk level, which is more genetic, comes through, and we start to get shorter. And this is exactly what's happening now. So we're getting shorter. We're getting shorter.
Yeah.
And originally, because we're less intelligent, and height correlates with intelligence. And originally, that was because our legs were getting longer, so we get taller. If you try and sit in a Victorian theatre, you notice, even if you're not that tall, there's not much leg room because they were short. They had short legs, and now we long legs, and then we've reached our maximum, and now we're going down. But also our diet is becoming so crap that then also our legs are just getting shorter as well. So it's a double effect. What's that in the window behind you? It's quite strange. There's this window thing behind you.
Yeah, no, that's the bushes blowing in the trees. There's a bit of a breeze out. But it's a weird. This is an Airbnb. This is just a red curtain that I pulled down.
Oh, I see. Oh, it's still light. Oh, it's light here, though, of course, because it doesn't get dark here. So we're about halfway through. So to those of you that are new, hello. God, I went by quick. Hello. Welcome to the Jolly Heretic. We are an online public house. It meets on Mondays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York, in which we discuss based science. Increasingly narcissism with Richard, and other stuff which is expounded from our woke joke universities. And if you have any questions, then please do send them in, and we will of course answer them today. And if you can send them in. Oh, I haven't signed into the old entropy, chaps. Sorry about that. I'm just going to sign into the old entropy. Sorry about that. Now, we have a resident poet here. Oh, my God. We have a resident poet here at the Jolly Heretic Public House, Mr. Quinn, and he has written a poem in honour of what we are discussing today, which goes as follows. And so it's farewell to the Tories. Say goodbye to electoral glories. They run out of steam and now can only dream. We're fed up of them telling us stories. Thank you very much, Mr. Quinn. And if you would like to buy Mr. Quinn's book of Jolly Heretic poetry, then it is, of course, available on Amazon. And if you're new to the channel and you would like a summary, amusing summary of my own research and thinking, then you can do no better than purchasing this book, which is The Naked Classroom, The Evolutionary Psychology of Your Time at School, in which I look at all of the various based questions to do with science and whatever, which they should have taught you at school, which they hang on, the speaker's making a noise. Stop it! Stop it! Damn it! But which they failed to do so. So anyway, and if you're new to the Jolly Heretic, please subscribe. It really helps if you do that. Subscribe here on YouTube and subscribe also on Substack, thejollyheretic.com, where I do I have in-person interviews with all kinds of interesting people, and where if you like what I do, you can support me for as little as the cost of a pint of beer a month. And if you please subscribe also to Richard's channel, which is just Richard Grannon, and his assorted sub channels, and that should also be jolly good. Now we were going to move on to I can't order a book with that title. What, The Naked Classroom, Jab 78. Well, there's various other books I've written. You can order the book Breeding the Human Herd, Eugenics, the Future of the Species, which is a book I wrote recently. I've just mutants. Oh yes, well, we don't order that because that was what I wrote like to contract, so I don't actually get any royalties from that.
Oh no, don't buy that.
No, don't buy that. Was pointless. By Breeding the Human Herd, or by the one I just said, which is The Naked Classroom, The Evolutionary Psychology of Your Time at School, and of course Richard's book you should buy as well, which is called A Cult of One. Yes, A Cult of One, which is very good as well. Now, what I was going to say, yeah. So moving on then to one of the things that okay, thank you, Jab 78. Jab 78 says that's okay. It is okay. Actually, before I move on to the other issues to do with narcissism, we should probably answer the questions that have been sent in. We should probably do that. So the first question we have, if you have any questions, you can send them in either on Entropy or on YouTube or on Odyssey, is as follows. From Reeve Tomasi: are things like dyscalculia and dyslexia real, or are they just a way of addressing non-intelligent people? Yeah, they are real. So intelligence is essentially it's a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid you have specific specialized abilities which are weakly associated with intelligence, which is why people that even have quite low IQ have no trouble reading. I mean, people that have Down syndrome with an IQ of 60 can be successfully taught to read. So reading is not that G linked. It's not that linked to intelligence. Similarly, basic mathematics is not that linked to intelligence. Higher mathematics is, but basic mathematics is not. So you have a problem with that. That's some problem at the base of like the intelligence pyramid, above which you have linguistic, mathematical, and verbal intelligence, above which you have G, general intelligence. So it's some problem with a module, some problem, it's some quite specific problem. So no, there is no evidence. If people who have dyslexia have lower IQ, it's normally because they're not reading very much and they're not learning new words, and words are thinking tools, and so that's then their IQ starts to go down. But once that's dealt with and once methods are put in place to try and help them, then their IQ goes back up. So I know plenty of people who, for example, in my research I do or whatever, who are highly intelligent, who are dyslexic, and they have things like interesting handwriting. And they make spelling mistakes and all kinds of stuff, but it doesn't seem to relate to intelligence. And similarly, dyscalculia, which is that you have specific problems with mathematics, likewise is weakly is only weakly G loaded. So it's probably some sort of problem like on the brain damage or something. Right. The second question comes from Hibernian Perspective. Thank you, sir. And he says, what does Richie, that's you, think of the demonic entity known as Bambi Thug, Ireland's cringe contribution to Eurovision? I personally think Ireland peaked with Dustin the Turkey. Yeah, I found that, but I think I forgot to ask you it. So what were your thoughts? You remember Bambi Thug, the Irish? Yeah. What are your thoughts on Bambi Thug?
Well, I was gonna ask you about aesthetics tonight. Anyway, there's this weird turning towards loving things that are ugly and aggressively ugly, and it's sort of a ugly for its own sake, like a pornography of ugliness, just to be obnoxious. And I see that, if you're asking me what I think of it, I think there's an overall, a kind of a death drive emerging in the collective human unconscious. That is literally a move away from that which is life affirming, that is towards thriving, that is towards health, that is towards sanity, and is saying, okay, let's move towards sickness, let's move towards death, let's move towards perversion and dead ends. So I see it as a manifestation of the death drive, of a collective death drive.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I have a friend who's a barrister, and he suggested to me, if you're watching, hello, this idea that we should understand wokeness as the Freudian death drive.
Right.
You know, there's the drive to life. This is the drive to death. There may be something in that. It seems to me that it's if you have a society that moves towards being extremely individually oriented and concerned with harm avoidance and concerned with equality, then this creates a system of runaway individualism until you have this idea that you can't even say that sickness is worse than health.
Right.
Like even that is is under the rubric of equality. And also you can't say it because it might hurt someone's feelings. That is under the rubric of equality. And then holding to that way of seeing the world, i.e. the individually oriented way of seeing the world, seems to be associated with mental illness, because it's a way of seeing the world that was basically selected against, as was mental illness. And so such people have very high neuroticism. They're very unhappy, angry, resentful people. And so they hate all that relates to structure and order. They want to break that down, because even if they've got social status, they're paranoid and think that they don't, and they feel anything that is to do with social status is an enemy, is the thing that's keeping them in their place as of low status, and so they hate it. And if they bring it down, then they bring about a situation of chaos in which perhaps they can attain status, or at the very least they feel a sense of satisfaction that that which they see as their enemy and their oppressor and is making them feel bad is brought down. It's almost like a catharsis, a release. And so therefore they hate that. What is beauty? Beauty to a great extent can be reduced to order. And so they hate that which is beautiful. They hate that which is traditional. Which again, order, beauty, and they are moved to create to tear that down and to create ugliness. And by on the one hand, by worshipping ugliness, they are in this sort of equality virtue signaling thing where they're more holy than the last man, in the sense that they're attracted to the ugly. But on the other hand, they're attracted to the ugly because that creates dysphoria for people, and people feel unhappy, and then they can attain power in the chaos that results in. And also it is chaos. Ugly is chaos. And you could argue that those people are evolved to survive in an environment of chaos. They are fast life history strategists. So they should be attracted to chaos.
I can hear our mutual friend, Dr. Paul Taylor, in my mind right now. There is a place for darkness. There is a place for tragedy. There is a place for ugliness. When I was growing up, I liked Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson, and some of her ethos and some of her look and her style, it comes from that. The punk movement was a valid movement. Strange avant-garde films and music that are disordered and chaotic. I think there's a place for all of these things. There is a place for darkness, but she was put forward as a representation for Ireland, and that was that's what got to me. I don't mind that she exists.
You can say that there's a place for darkness. You know, there's a place for Iron Maiden. I like Iron Maiden, but it's normally not going to be mainstream. Yeah, it's a niche thing. We were driving through Wallasey, and Richard said, "What's your favorite Iron Maiden track?" Our Head, and I said it was Revelations, and then he put it on.
And I played it for him to keep him happy.
Found the former house of my grandfather, and what do you want? I'm live streaming, and you've just made a stupid noise.
Well done.
Well done. my son there.
He
Anyway,
sounds like you.
yeah, it does. He's similar character. He's not actually. He's much like my wife. Yeah. So I told him to read for half an hour, and I wonder if he actually got absorbed in it and has just stopped reading now, an hour and a half later. The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. That's right, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Yeah, a shrub rocketeer.
You were pattern interrupted there. You were about to finish a thought about the place for darkness.
Yes. So perhaps there's a place in a healthy mind, I suppose, for negative emotions. We have evolved to feel things like sadness for adaptive reasons. They help us to ensure that negative thing doesn't happen to us again. Or perhaps there can be a positive dimension to what we might call negative emotions. So, like an element of love, of being in love, is longing, which is negative. Or an element of being in love is fear, maybe that it won't last, which is negative, or whatever. So there's something adaptive about negative emotions. And it can be argued that one of the adaptive things about horror films, why do people watch horror films, or why do people read tragic novels, or whatever, is that psychologically it prepares you to deal with negative things happening in your life. So that it primes you to cope. So there's something good about that aspect of life, but you can take it too far. And when it becomes the mainstream thing, then you have a society in crisis. You have a society,
and it's so impotent as well that they put her forward. Like, look at our empty, impotent punk gesturing of rebellion. I mean, you know, I hate all this virtuous. It's so empty. It's so silly.
Ireland of all countries, it's so obvious that Ireland is the one that it's this extreme reaction. It's the same way that you'd get people at university that would go from being fundamentalist Christians to screaming atheists, or vice versa. And it's the same thing. So the Irish, they go from being extreme Catholics, where the whole country is dominated by Catholicism and all this kind of thing, to the extreme opposite. It's quite a predictable thing. Finland kind of did that. Goes from being extreme Lutheran to Lordy, but there was something light-hearted about Lordy. Lordy was a bit of a joke. Lordy, you know, whereas this was just something nasty. I mean, this was the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to show the children. It's unpleasant.
Yeah, there's this sort of very safe rebellion within the structures, within the power structures of mainstream media, the corporations, and absolute conformity. Look at how naughty I'm being. I just think, oh, please go away. There's nothing.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point. Yeah, what kind? It's not a rebellion that gets you in trouble. And if that's the case, it's a pseudo rebellion. It's not a real rebellion. It's oh, look how, you know, she is rebelling against a society that no longer exists.
Right.
She is rebelling against the society of the 70s or the 60s or something that no longer exists. It would be shocking then. It's only very slightly shocking now.
Yeah.
Much more shocking to stand up and, you know, sing some racist song or something. If you're a genuine rebel, you won't want to do that.
Well, there was something Douglas Murray said, and I think he's quoting somebody else. It's as though the battle's already won, but because you need the battle for your sense of self, you just end up in these quixotic imaginary battles, tilting at windmills, pretending that that's your enemy.
I suppose also, if you're very high in neuroticism, that's the interesting thing. You will never feel the battle as won. If you're Machiavellian, you will never feel the battle as won. If you're a narcissist, you will never feel that you have enough people that love you, even if the whole world loves you. That's the thing about people that are Machiavellian. They never feel it's won. They feel that they're losing. That they never rest on their laurels, and that's the problem with people that are conservative. They just want to grill. They believe they have agency. There's studies on this, but they believe they have agency and control over the world and power,
right?
Even if they don't.
That's delusional.
The leftists believe that they don't have agency over the world and control and power, even when they do. And so you'll get these people that will insist that, oh, you know, I'm not part of rich left-wing people that will talk about the elite. Who do you think the bloody elite is in this country? You know, and who do you think is running things in this country, for God's sake? Oh,
These
no,
are
apparently,
people who own 3 mansions, and they're like, "Oh, the elite are after us." After who? You're the elite.
there's still these gentry with grouse moors and God knows what, and they run things. No, that's not how it is anymore.
Yeah.
You know, they're living in a time warp, but that is good, because from a Machiavellian perspective, then that allows you to always strive for more power, never give up, always strive for more. You'll always be able to make out, oh yeah, the elite, and you're never in the elite. And
Right.
and that's the thing. If you genuinely believe you're in the elite, then that's dangerous, because perhaps you'll fall out of it. So you've got to have that striving sense that I'm not in the elite to stay in the elite. You know?
That's some weird. I need to think about that. That's really interesting, because there's something fetishistic about that you never actually win, but you're always fighting to win. So the fantasy can continue forever and ever. This sweaty, fetishistic fantasy with yourself as the perpetual victim, the perpetually oppressed, martyr. There's martyr fantasy that never ends.
That's an extreme manifestation of it, but in a less extreme manifestation, at the very least, you do not believe that you are. To believe that you are mega successful is decadent, and from there you fall down, and others come up and displace you.
Right.
So you've got to have a certain belief that there's more. There's always more. Eventually, you will become one of the gods. You know, like
you
an
will
ancient Greek.
And ascend.
So I think this is an adaptive trait that you never ever, and that's a trait that the people on the left have at the moment. I think in England, that they do not have power. They are in charge in every way that matters. But they estimate that things like GB News or the Reform Party or whatever, they're saying, oh my God, look at the result of the European election last night, criticizing woke. Darwin Butler said that's just, that's bad, because that's leading the way open to the far right and all this, and it's this paranoia. I'm sure that Reform will not do. I mean, will not do as well as they're making out, or whatever. But so it's always this sense that they don't have power. It's very interesting. What I was going to ask you about, moving on slightly. Oh, actually, we should do the other questions.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So we have a question from from 948. Yes. Okay. Hyborian Spirit. Thank you, sir. Theory on women who exclusively date other races. I'm not sure I have a theory on women who exclusively date other races. I mean, there are some studies that indicate that if you outbreed, if you are attracted to those that are genetically highly different from you, then that's reflective of an unstable ecology in which they might have some useful adaptation. So you would expect people to be relatively strategic, that would engage in such behavior on average, and there's some evidence that's true. Also, you're taking risk if you go out with someone that's different from you, even just culturally different from you, let alone racially. You're taking a risk, and taking risk is associated with fast strategy, and also you're ensuring that your children will be less related to you than they otherwise will be, which again is a fast strategy thing, because you'll probably bond with them less and invest in them less. Though there were some studies from Hawaii which found that mixed race, like interracial couples, compensated for their physical dissimilarity by being particularly mentally similar, like more the same in intelligence, let's say, than were white couples or Hawaiian couples.
Yeah.
So that's
isn't there lower divorce rates as well in mixed rate couples, according to some studies? Not heard that one. When we discussed this, because we were talking about the fact that I tend to date outside of my race when we were in Liverpool, you mentioned this R strategy. Could you explain to people who don't know what that is?
What R strategy is? So we're all on a spectrum from a fast strategy, which is adaptive to an unstable yet easy ecology. So it's easy, food's on the trees, whatever, easy, but it's unstable. There's lots of diseases or animals, things that kill you. So you live fast, die young. So if you have offspring and you invest a lot, you shouldn't invest a lot in each offspring because they could just be randomly killed at any moment. So what you do, or any partner. So what you do is you have a large number of partners and you have a large number of offspring, and you just sort of hope that some survive in this unstable, random.
Scatter them and hope the numbers figure it out.
Obviously, extreme examples would be things like spiders or whatever that have loads and loads of offspring. Then as the environment reaches its carrying capacity for the species, then it becomes more stable and harsh, i.e., like our environment. Then if you do that strategy, then all of your offspring will be they won't be adapted to the environment. They could all just die. So therefore you have to take energy away from basically copulation and put it towards growth, put it towards becoming adapted to the environment, and put it towards nurture. So then you have a smaller number of offspring with a smaller number of partners, and you make sure that you're highly adapted to the ecology. Now, in that ecology, you've got to survive, so you've got to find a niche to survive in. And the way you survive in a niche is you're not a generalist, you're a specificist, is to be highly environmentally plastic. So that means that you can change and you can alter, and so this selects for a long childhood in which you can be trained essentially by your parents who are investing in you how to cope in that environment. And so everything slows down. And so the age of puberty is later, and the age of menopause is later. Everything slows down. And also a difficult environment will select things like intelligence, and it will select for being, you will have to bond with people because the bond could be paid back. So it will select for more cooperative personality. And so then you get these two extremes, fast and slow. And so the idea is that if you obviously a slow life history strategist, small number of offspring, invests a great deal in the offspring, bonds with the offspring, nurtures the offspring. So therefore he selects for people, and you're highly adapted to a very specific environment, remember. So you select for someone that's genetically similar to you, so that the genetic linkages that mean you're adapted to that environment, that specific environment, don't break up. Also, they're genetically similar to you, so you're passing on more of your genes. Because the person's genetically similar to you, you will bond more with your child. You'll have more of a reason to invest in your child because it will carry more of your genes. So slow life strategists will tend, therefore, to be like that, and to be endogenous. Whereas a faster life history strategy will be exogamous, because someone that's genetically different, you're not adapted to a specific ecology. You're just a generalist. So therefore, someone with some different, who looks different, could have some useful gene. You might as well take the risk, because you could be killed at any second anyway.
So that resonates with me for somebody, as somebody does date outside of my ethnic boundaries, the risk element. And I would also add to that from the narcissism point of view. When I did my first 3 years of narcissistic abuse coaching from 2013 onward to 2016, 80% of the relationships that people were describing to me either took place between people between very different age groups, where there's a big generational gap, or different ethnicities with cultures that really just didn't.
That fits. So you've got the risk and you've got the difference, and then with the age gap, as far as I can see, what that does is it takes the extreme of a fast life history ecology. So if you're a man in an unstable ecology, you just basically should have sex with as many women as you can get away with. But to the extent that you're selective, you should go for a woman that's very young.
Right.
So fine. Now with a woman, you in an unstable ecology, what you have more to lose from the sexual encounter, so you will be slightly more interested in psychological traits than the man, and what you will ultimately go for is a very high status man. That's the thing that you have in unstable ecologies. You get all these women, and they gravitate around the harem, around a very high status man. So it's an R strategy thing. You just want a high status man, because a high status man, probably his gene, the reason he's high status is because his genes are adapted to the ecology. He's genetically healthy, and he's tough, and he's big. And so that will be passed on to your children. They're more likely to survive. In a K ecology, you might trade the status of the man for the fact that he's a good nurturer. And that's not necessarily the same thing. Yeah. It correlates, because if he's got status, he'll have resources and he'll invest them in you, but it's not the same thing. That he's a good nurturer, that he's kind to the children, that he looks after the children and whatever, you see. So therefore you end up with monogamy, in these more stable yet harsh ecologies. But no, a fast strategy woman, you just go for the alpha male, absolute alpha male. And what is a good proxy for being an alpha male is age. So you would expect them to be sexually selected to age, sexually attracted to age.
So if I could just pull one thing out from that, when you said, say, the R strategy is an unstable environment, but it's an easy environment. So there's a lot of resources in the environment, but it's chaotic and you could die quickly. You're not suggesting to people that means the entire country they were in was in a state of war, but they were wealthy, but maybe just their childhood environment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so a child environment, or just a big part. It's about 50% genetic anyway. But
Okay.
yeah, so for example, if a woman, a big predictor of turning a woman into a fast, efficient strategist at the environmental level would be having a stepfather. That is telling the woman, that is telling the child, this is an unstable ecology. There's more than one man around. This is unstable.
Yeah.
So whereas a traditional marriage that stays together, controlling for genetics is telling it the opposite. So so I would very much predict the fastest strategists would go for different races, and they would go for things like age gaps and other risks, any
other risk. Yeah. Make
they like drama. They like if you're a fastest strategist, you're adapted to an ecology of instability. So you're adapted. You're adapted to like drama, basically.
This must correlate for narcissistic abuse, then. It must do.
Oh, I think it does, absolutely. I mean, you were talking about the genetics of it. I mean, people are sexually attracted to people that are like each other. So women will be narcissistically abused by men, or men will be narcissistically abused by normally vulnerable narcissistic or BPD women. But they're going to be genetically similar. Narcissists select for narcissists. It's not a coincidence. It's not like the idea that we have is this kind of almost a fairy tale, or a very unpleasant fairy tale, where there's
fairy tales were, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. But like, the beautiful, kind, lovely woman who's very caring, and she ends up with the narcissist. That's a simplification. Or the kind, loving, lovely man who ends up with the narcissist, with a borderline personality or something. That's a simplification. Most of the husbands of women that have women who have borderline personality, which is crossed over with narcissism, are attracted to narcissistic men. The narcissistic men get something out of it, i.e. narcissistic supply, but often they won't be able to cope with the flip side, which is being abused by this person, so they'll break up. And so what was found was that those kinds of women will end up with men that have some narcissistic traits, and also, like the women, have anxiety and depression and things like that, but have some kind of personality disorder, psychopathology, or avoidant personality, or dependent personality, or some kind of psychological disorder with some traits of that, and mental illness. So they're selecting for something genetic. And it's the same with all of these relationships. So you would expect it's not a coincidence. People, there'll be perhaps the one that comes across as more ghastly, and maybe that's the man, maybe it's the woman, but the man, it will not be
random,
so black and white. No.
Yeah.
With regard to that, though, I was going to ask you about this. A lot of the writing on narcissistic abuse, and on, let's say someone gets into a relationship with a person who has borderline personality disorder, they're addicted to it, they crave for the positive that comes out of it and the love.
Or you mean me? You're talking about
anybody in particular. But then they said that if you carry on in that relationship, eventually it says that you lose your sense of self.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Why? I know what a sense of self is, but what with the question of people that are BPD have a weak sense of self, I understood it to mean eventually that they oscillate between extremes, and so they're not constant in how they behave. Right. Yes. So what does it mean that so you're trying to please this narcissist all the time and do what that person wants? To keep them in order, which is never going to work, because they're never going to be satisfied. But why in that context, and what exactly does it mean for a person to lose their sense of self in a relationship like that?
Well, in order to engage in the relationship, you have to move into so there's the dyad, there's the two people, but then there's a triad, there's this third entity, there's the shared fantasy space between them. And that's largely controlled by the person with the greater and stronger pathology, the narcissist in the relationship. And so you're entering into a fantasy space with them. This is a theory from a Dutch chap came up with it in the University of Ghent in 1989. The shared fantasy is perfectly normal within friendships, within relationships. There is a shared fantasy. There is a third entity between two people. The problem with a narcissistically abusive relationship is that shared fantasy space is built on exploitative and abusive coordinates. And they can't afford for you to be a self. They have to, so they split you into two, and then they absorb you into themselves.
Well, what the hell does that mean?
Okay, so what
does that mean for the person that's being absorbed?
The person who's being absorbed. So imagine me and you are in a narcissistically abusive relationship, and I'm the narcissist. You're operating as though, well, Richard's an adult, I'm an adult, and we're two friends, and we speak and we work together sometimes, and that's what it is. That's what you believe is happening. But on another level, I'm coaxing you into this shared fantasy space, and I'm slowly eroding your boundaries to get you to conform to entrain you into the shared fantasy space. So that it's not we are equal, it's so that I am above you, and I'm entraining you into a subservient space. It wouldn't work.
Right. So basically, you're saying it makes you're making the person act in ways that they wouldn't naturally want to act in.
Yes. So that I can. The narcissist can't stand the idea of separate people. So if I want a relationship with you, I have to absorb you into me, into my fantasy.
At the same time, when they have BPD, they get anxiety with regard to being too close, and so they push you away.
Yeah, so they'll cycle through a more, let's say, grandiose, narcissistic, psychopathic phase and feel good and be like, Ed loves me. Come here, Ed. Yes, I'm going to absorb you narcissistically. And then as they pull you in, that to their horror, they see that you're close and they think, oh my God, he can see me. Get out. Get out. How dare you be this close to me? And in a sense, the BPD is much more complicated than MPD. They induce their own narcissistic injury or their own borderline injury by forcing intimacy too rapidly that they're then horrified by. The narcissist isn't horrified by it. They're perfectly comfortable with it. They think that's normal. They're horrified by your distance. They want that.
And why are they horrified? Why are they horrified by the intimacy? Because they're concerned that you'll see the real them.
Yeah, because with the BPD person, there is still. This is my pontification. This isn't the orthodox view. So what I would claim is the narcissist and the BPD are largely raised in similarly abusive environments, but where the narcissist withdrew into a defensive shell, that strategy worked, quotes, and they created a completely coherent shell that they then the child disappears inside of, and the child dies. All the vulnerable emotions, all the capacity for intimacy, the child part of the self dies. But for the borderline, it doesn't work. The egg is fractured. It falls apart. They have to rebuild it, and they hate that because it means they're a collapsed narcissist. They're a failed narcissist. They're not quite doing it. But the positive is the child stays alive, half dead, half alive. And so that's why the prognosis for BPD is so much more hopeful than it is for MPD, because a BPD can do vulnerability. They can do therapy. It's bloody hard, but we know that they can. We know that they sometimes they can get there because there is a child to interact with. There is no child there in the MPD.
Right. So basically, what this losing a sense of self means is that you just become someone's subservient to someone, and you don't act in a way that is consistent with your own self integrity, almost.
Yes, with one final step, you become me. I need you to become me. So you will start to mirror me. That's my will. We would you really need a family relationship or sexual romance, because why else would you stick around for it? As a heterosexual man with another heterosexual man, you're not going to stick around for that. But if there was a high stakes relationship and you say you begin to love the BPD woman, or you're in a cult and you love the man, he's your cult leader, but he's going to lead you to the promised land, and you're going to stick through the abuse, they will gouge out all that is authentic in you, eviscerate you, and put themselves in you to turn you into a sort of a puppet version of them. You become like a mini me, a clone of them. That's where your sense of self is completely smashed to pieces, because you end the relationship, people are walking around, they don't know who the hell they are anymore.
Because they've invested so much in it.
They've invested so much in it, and they've been so interfered with. It's a colonization process. I would have to psychologically colonize you. I have to brainwash you through intermittent punishment.
We use these metaphors. I mean, I suppose a simpler way of doing it is just say you've created a very strong bond with that person. The person is abusing you. But yet the bond is still very strong because of the positive dimensions of it or whatever, and so it's very, very difficult to break that bond because you invested so much in it. And so from an evolutionary perspective, you kind of wasted your time when you could have been investing in something else or somebody else, which is why a friendship ending if it's a close friendship, can be so painful, because you've let other friends die by the wayside, and you've made the mistake of investing in that one. I want to name one next question. Clifford Bates, thank you, sir. Fred Bates says Johnson's problem was less social media, but his new wife, who held the suburban London Liberals. His new wife drove him. That's interesting.
That's my mother's theory. That's my mother's theory of Boris Johnson.
What is Mrs. Gavin theory? Tell me Mrs. Gavin's theory.
You do not. That's my father's name. She would kill you, Mrs. Atkinson. It was the wife. The wife, which I don't believe. I can't get my head around that she would have that much control around him. But all the mistakes
that's what was argued, that before that he was under the control of his Svengali, under the control of Dominic Cummings, and then there was this move towards her, and then she was controlling him, and then Dominic Cummings was sort of frozen out.
What he needs is a Richard Grannon Overcome Codependency course, I think. Let's reach out to Boris.
I think if you're watching, Boris, I think get in touch with email thejollyheretic.com and thejollyheretic@protonmail.com.
Codependency.
So I think that there could be some truth in that. First Bates is interesting. I mean, he does give you the impression of being someone that thinks with cock. I mean, he's been married 3 times, and he had an affair while he was with Marina Wheeler, and he's had various affairs, and so I think probably does think with his cock. Okay, the next question comes from Professor Bates as well. Thank you, sir. And he says the victory of the wets and those who didn't want to be seen as harsh post-Thatcher defined the current Cameron Tories. Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, probably.
The not seeming harsh, and this terrible idea they had that we've been defeated badly in 1997. This was and 2001. This was a trauma for the Conservatives. Oh my God! And so we need to imitate Blair. We need to become more multicultural, become more pro-gay, become just in every way imitate the Labour Party. And that's what they did, like a narcissistic relationship where they lost their true self.
Mirroring the abuser of Tony Blair.
Mirroring the abuser that was Tony Blair. And so therefore, yes, we've solved it. And therefore,
now we know what it was.
Broken free of the abuse of New Labour and gained power. They didn't know who they were anymore. And they were, they were just wandering around for 14 years in a stupor.
They should be their authentic selves. Be harsh. Stand on the necks of the poor. It's what we want from you. Come on.
Well, Rishi Sunak said today that the criminal justice system should show no mercy to criminals, which I infer is him saying that you should execute all criminals.
Absolutely. That's what I would understand by that statement.
All criminals should, like King Draco, like all draconian.
Impale them along the M25.
And you just drive along the M25, and you just he was
committed a crime today.
He was speeding. He had to be. He was going at 75 miles an hour in a 70 mile an hour zone. That's what happens. Don't
impaled through the bum, out through the clavicle.
It's really hard though. I don't know. Do you drive an automatic or a manual?
Automatic, yeah.
I drive an automatic, and I find that you can quite easily speed in an automatic and not realize it. Whereas if you're in a manual, then it makes a noise like that, and you know, shit. You know? So you're quite easy to end up just losing your life. Yeah, I was once driving along a road in Finland, and I was going 20 miles an hour over the speed limit. I was like, shit, I didn't realize it. They're very liberal about speeding in Finland. You can go well over the speed limit. No one cares.
What does Rishi Sunak want? He wants harsher punishments for criminals.
No mercy.
Is that what he said? No mercy.
No mercy.
I love that kind of talk. It's great.
I'm thinking that they're going to be executed. It's going to be basically bringing back the bloody code that we had until the Victorian times, where all felonies carried the death penalty.
Yeah, just automatically.
It's just, you're hanging 8-year-old boys for stealing bread.
Yes. If you don't swipe your plastic bag at Asda and say that you had no bags, death.
Death. Yeah. Obviously, yeah. No mercy for criminals. No mercy.
Just have a ban outside. Death.
Just no mercy. Just have someone there with a gun. Did you swipe it?
Come here. Dead.
Death. I think so. Okay. Next question is from Nick Corkalides, and he says, "Small stack did nothing wrong. Big stack everything wrong." I don't know what stack STACHE. I don't know what that means, Mr. Corkalides, but I thank you very much. And then Gareth Bureaucrat says, "Hello, R strategy, K strategy, and goodbye." Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bureaucrat. That's very kind of you. And then we have some other questions as well. Over here. Oh my God, there's loads of questions. Oh my God, why aren't they coming up? This is really weird in the entropy. So Gingy Boy 57 says, "Are you going to the Diddy party?" I don't know what it is, so I can't tell you. And then Low Mercury Tuner says, "I heard Ryan Falk say Britain had the economic and military resources to keep India after World War II if they wanted to. But do you keep control over a population of 400 million? What do you want to do? What do you think?" I better think about that and answer it next week. We did the theory on women. AA said in his UO stream last week, that says Hibernian perspective, that the left succeeded because they never settle for momentary victory and never satisfied what they have. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is what we were, of course, saying. Indeed. And then Low Mercury Tuner says, "How much is who I find good looking determined by my genes telling me who I should find good looking as versus it being learned or culturally influenced?" I don't know. It's probably about half. With these things, if we don't know the answer, it's normally about half. But I will look into that for you, sir. I will the genetics of attraction. I will get back to you next week. But the answer is normally about half. I wonder if that. Yeah, it must be, because like I know a bloke. He's a good guy, but he fancies only women that are a bit ugly. That's who he goes for, and it's genetic similarity that's doing that because he's a bit ugly. So he's attracted to just these munters, and that's the genetic similarity, sort of coming through. Whereas anyone would objectively say, what the fuck, just this dog, and I'm like, mate, like, what's this? And like he's been out with quite good looking girls, but he always breaks
doesn't like them.
It's like I call it the Prince Charles strategy. So you go out with like a sex symbol. But ultimately you are attracted to a bit of a horse, or the Prince William strategy. Likewise, you go out with like a sex symbol like Kate Middleton, but then you are attracted to the Marquis of Cholmondeley, Rose Hanbury, who's got that sort of horsey look.
Has he really done that? Has he had an affair with that woman?
Yeah.
Oh, naughty boy.
That's why she's not public. That's why she's not. I haven't seen it.
Right, what's happened, Ed? What's the conspiracy?
The conspiracy is that she's like, obviously she wants their relationship is over, but it's considered really terrible that could happen. So they're just sort of keeping her sweet and making her, and
sweet, yeah.
So she's behind the scenes, and so she's so that and there were bigger conspiracies. One was that she had an affair with that Thomas Kingston guy, and she got pregnant, and then she had to have an abortion, and then Thomas Kingston killed himself. I made up that conspiracy.
Nice.
And then well, not on me, actually, it was my friend from university that made it up, and I broadcast it on my channel, and then somebody from TikTok with like 1 million followers broadcast it, and then I was asked, "Have you heard that theory?" by some random taxi driver, and I was like, "Yeah, I have heard. Yeah, I made it up." my housemate from university made it up, but in together with her vicar husband. Yeah, okay, we're going to wind up now. So, chaps, I think I'm not here next Monday because my parents are coming to stay because my daughter's being confirmed. So I probably won't be here. So the Monday after that, I'll have to look into it. But because then I'm going on holiday. Where are you going on holiday this year, Richard?
I'm going to Ibiza tomorrow, Ed.
Oh, you're Ibiza. Oh, fantastic. They hate you there. They hate the British in the Canary.
They hate them. I've just forced myself upon them. Here is my passport. Get back.
Well, I'm going to Bulgaria. I'm going to go to Bulgaria, so that should be fun. Yeah, I
what are you doing there?
Just holiday with the family.
How lovely! I like Bulgaria.
Bulgaria. I've not been there. I went to Albania last summer. This time, Bulgaria. Excellent. So anyway, chaps, I will see you. I don't know if next week I'll look into it, but I will see you all soon. Tally ho and goodbye.
Bye.